Have you ever pondered on the importance of session tracking in web development? Well, let's unravel this together. In the world of web development, session tracking is a mechanism that holds significant importance. It's the unsung hero that maintains the state of user interactions across multiple requests. Imagine you're browsing an online store, adding items to your cart. It's session tracking that remembers what you've added, even as you hop from page to page. It allows the server to recognize that a series of requests are coming from the same client, thus enabling the storage and retrieval of user-specific data. The magic of session tracking is that it creates a seamless and personalized user experience, which is crucial in today's digital age. So this concept isn't just a fancy term, it's a fundamental building block in web development. Now that we understand the importance of session tracking, let's dive into the different methods we can use for session tracking. First up, we have cookie-based session tracking. This is a widely used method that involves small pieces of data, known as cookies, being stored by the client's browser. These cookies carry a session identifier, or session ID, which is sent with every request to the server. This allows the server to recognize and remember the client, keeping track of their interaction with the website over multiple requests. So, how exactly does this work? Well, let's break it down with a simple example. When a client first interacts with a website, the server creates a unique session ID for that client. This session ID is then stored as a cookie within the client's browser. Imagine it like this. The server hands the client a unique ticket, and every time the client returns, they present this ticket. That way, the server knows exactly who they are dealing with and can provide a consistent and personalized experience. Now, creating a session cookie is quite straightforward. In Java, for instance, you would create a new cookie object and add it to the response. It might look something like this. Cookie = new cookie, session ID, 1234567889. Response add cookie. This essentially says, create a new cookie called session ID, give it the value 1234567889, and add it to the response going back to the client. Retrieving this session cookie is equally simple. Again, using Java as an example, you would get the array of cookies from the request and look for the one with the name session ID. It would look something like this. Cookies = request.getCookies. So there you have it. That's the basics of cookie-based session tracking. It's a simple and effective way to remember clients, making their experience with the website smoother and more personalized. Cookies are incredibly handy for session tracking, but what if cookies are disabled or not supported by the client's browser? This brings us to our next method. When cookies are not an option, we can resort to URL rewriting. URL rewriting is a clever technique used in session tracking where the session ID is appended to the URL as a query parameter. This method proves particularly handy when cookies are disabled or not supported by the client's browser. So how does URL rewriting work? Well, think of it as a way of embedding the session ID directly into the web address. When a user clicks on a link on your web page or requests a specific URL, the session ID is automatically included in the request. Let's take a look at an example. Assume you have a URL like, to append a session ID to this URL, we'd use a method like encoderl from the response object, which would transform the URL into something like, the encoderl method checks if cookies are enabled. If they are, it returns the URL unchanged. If cookies are disabled, it appends the session ID to the URL as a query parameter. It's a neat little trick to ensure the server can associate the series of requests from the same client as a session. But while URL rewriting is a useful tool, it's essential to be aware that it does come with its own set of challenges. For instance, if a user bookmarks a URL with a session ID, this could lead to a session error when the bookmarked URL is accessed after the session has expired. It could also potentially expose the session ID to third parties, leading to security risks. Moreover, URL rewriting can lead to URL pollution, as the web address can get quite long and messy with the addition of the session ID. This might not be the most aesthetically pleasing, and it can complicate things when it comes to SEO or sharing links. URL rewriting is a useful fallback option, but it does come with its own set of challenges. Now let's move on to a method that can be used when neither cookies nor URL rewriting is feasible. Hidden form fields offer a unique solution to session tracking. This method employs the use of HTML forms to store session IDs, When the form is submitted, the session ID is sent to the server along with the form data. This technique provides a stealthy way of tracking sessions, especially when cookies or URL rewriting are not feasible. Let's take a closer look at how this works. A hidden form field is an invisible section of an HTML form that holds data without altering the form's appearance. These fields can contain any type of information, but for session tracking, they often hold session IDs. Creating a hidden form field is quite straightforward. Inside your form tag, you'll add an input tag with the type attribute set to hidden. The name attribute will be something like session-id, and the value attribute will hold the actual session ID. For instance, your HTML might look something like this. This line of code creates a hidden field that stores the session ID. When the form is submitted, this session ID is sent along with any other form data to the server. What's unique about this method is that it's entirely invisible to the user. The hidden field doesn't affect the layout or appearance of the form, and unless the user views the page's source code, they won't be aware of its existence. Hidden form fields are particularly useful in certain scenarios. For example, they're a great fit for single-page applications, where the user interacts with the website without causing a full-page refresh. They're also handy when dealing with legacy systems that might not support other session tracking methods. However, it's important to note that, like any other method, hidden form fields have their limitations. They only work when dealing with forms, and they don't track user interactions outside of form submissions. Hidden form fields are quite useful, especially for single-page applications. But there's one more method we need to discuss: opening. The HttpSession object provides a server-side solution for session tracking. As we continue our exploration of session tracking, we now turn our attention to the HttpSession object. This object is part of the Java Servlet API, and it provides a powerful and flexible method for managing session data directly on the server side. The HttpSession Interface in Java is designed to store session-specific data. This data is kept on the server, which provides an additional layer of security, as it doesn't get exposed to the client side like it does with cookies or URL rewriting. So how does HttpSession work? Well, HttpSession uses cookies or URL rewriting internally to track sessions. This means that even though you're storing data on the server, HttpSession still relies on these methods to identify which session belongs to which client. Let's consider an example. Imagine we have a user logging into our web application. We could create an HttpSession and store the username as an attribute. The code would look something like this. Here, we're calling the getSession method, which creates a new session or returns the existing one associated with this request. Then we use the setAttribute method to store our user's username in the session. Later on, if we want to retrieve this data, we can use the getAttribute method like so. In this case, we're getting the session in the same way and then retrieving our stored username. Closing. The HttpSession object provides a secure and versatile option for session tracking. But whichever method you choose, there are certain best practices to follow. Remember, HttpSession is just one of several options for session tracking. Each method has its strengths and weaknesses, and the best choice will depend on your specific needs and constraints. But no matter which method you choose, remember to always prioritize security, efficiency, and user experience. Finally, let's talk about some best practices for session tracking. First and foremost, ensure to use HTTPS to secure your session data during transmission. This safeguards sensitive information from prying eyes. Next, store minimal information in session attributes. This reduces overhead, boosts performance, and aids in maintaining lean, efficient applications. Moreover, it's a good practice to invalidate sessions after a period of inactivity. This mitigates the risk of session hijacking, keeping your users' data secure. Finally, implement appropriate session management strategies. This is crucial in handling scalability and performance requirements, particularly for larger, more complex web applications. Remember, these best practices are not mere suggestions, but they are essential steps towards creating a secure, efficient, and user-friendly web experience. By understanding and implementing session tracking effectively, developers can create more robust and interactive web applications that maintain user state across multiple requests. So, keep exploring and happy coding!